I thank you for allowing me to be here today, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the research that we've been conducting down at Western Kentucky University this past year. And uh, we were able to be part of the hemp pilot program starting back in 2014. And that particular time, we were able to get some seed and more or less just plant the seed and do a little bit of research. But we weren't able to do a lot of research based upon how much seed was available. But we did learn some things. And one thing that we did learn in 2014 in Bowling Green was that we had an extremely dry year, and that left us with uneven emergence of our hemp crop. And so this picture here is 3 weeks after planting, and you can see we still have recent germination of some of the hemp coming up, and you can see some other problematic weeds there as well. So we learned that water is critical, and if you don't have soil moisture during establishment, then you might get poor establishment like you saw like you see here in 2014, where we have few plants, and you see a lot of low-growing weeds there, and that's because we said carpet weed wasn't going to hurt us too much. We'd leave it, but larger weeds like pigweed and lamb's quarter and things of that nature, we would hand rogue out of the plots. So, that led us to be thinking about trying to address some of the potential weed problems that we may have. And if you hear a lot about industrial hemp, and sometimes you hear that there's not a weed problem and they don't utilize herbicides in other parts of the world, but there's quite a bit different climate in Canada than it is here in Kentucky. And so these are just some pictures that we had from some other research going on that I'm not talking about today at Western, but this is of a lower growing type of hemp, phenola, and we saw yellow nut sedge and lamb's quarters this year. All right, smooth pigweed and morning glory are some other common weeds that we observe in our research trial. And so looking at some of our research in Bowling Green, and the University of Kentucky was kind enough to let us replicate our research out at the Spindletop Farm here in Lexington. These are some of the common weeds that we observed over the last 2 years in our research plots. Now, those of you may not have heard of teff, but teff is a warm season annual forage crop. And we didn't have any problems with that this year, but we did in 2014 because that's the area that we went ahead and established our industrial hemp plots in an established teff forage field. But you most likely are familiar with crabgrass and goosegrass and pigweeds and morning glories and things of that nature. Now, we also saw some areas where we didn't have too much of a weed problem. And so this is from a herbicide trial in Bowling Green. And these plots might have been from where we applied some herbicides, but our control plots look somewhat similar in Bowling Green. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But where we had good emergence and we have rapid canopy cover, weeds aren't necessarily as big of a problem. Okay, so you can imagine canopy cover like that, how it'd be difficult for weeds to establish. So are weeds a problem in industrial hemp production? Well, possibly so if we have excessive moisture, which we got to see this year. This is my parents' front yard. We had a 100-year flood event in my parents' house where a thunderstorm just popped up and set over the house for about 30 minutes. And if you see the bottom picture, those of you in the back will be a little bit difficult, but the water in the background, that was where one of my fertility trials was located. So needless to say that the hemp seed germinated in the ground and wasn't able to push up through that crust and did not establish. But if we have excessive or low moistures, we don't have good establishment, or maybe we have other issues due to improper planting. And, we saw a lot of predation from birds. And so those of you that are into wildlife management. If you want doves, then grow industrial hemp. It's the greatest thing to attract doves, more so than millet, I believe. All right, but also some of these seed-producing cultivars that may be lower in stature in terms of their canopy, and we kind of like those, the idea of not running so much material through combines, but you're going to have a more open canopy, and when you have sunlight reaching the soil surface, somebody once told me you have the ability for weed seed to germinate. All right, so we started a herbicide research trial at Western Kentucky University this last year, and we seeded in late June. We used conventional tillage and cultipack and lightly dragged before we seeded, and we also did a trial in Lexington as well. So we had the same trial at 2 locations. Difference was in Bowling Green we had a more fiber type industrial hemp, and in Lexington we used one that's mainly allocated towards seed production, a lower growing canopy industrial hemp. All right, so in Bowling Green, we utilized a drill where we went on 3-inch centers, and we were able to get our drill to plant around 39 kilograms or 35 pounds to an acre. So that's somewhere in between what you would normally use maybe for seed production, a little bit higher, but a little bit lower for fiber production. All right, in Lexington, they utilized a research planter, and so they were on wider row spacing and looked at about 20 pounds to an acre. So this would be more geared towards seed production. We used 13 different treatments, and we had 5 pre-emergent herbicides, 6 post-emergent herbicides, and we had a weedy check and a non-weedy check. So the non-weedy check is where we would go in and hand rogue the weeds out of those plots to make it a weed-free check. Okay, these are the different treatments, and so some of these herbicides you might be familiar with. Most of these are all labeled for corn and or soybean production. We do have some that are labeled for cotton production, and even a few more so towards the turf grass industry. But we tried to get a lot of different modes of action to evaluate. So a lot of these herbicides differed between modes of action. All right, the pre-emergents are the first 5 listed there, which is pendimethalin, pyroxasulfuron, metallochlorofoamosaphin, and mesotrione. This is an aerial picture of our research plot in Bowling Green, and on the bottom we have the research plots are in order as you see in the table listed to the left. And just looking from an aerial aspect, you can see that plot number 5 there doesn't have a whole lot of hemp in it, and that would be mesotrione. Also, looking at number 8, trifloxysulfuron, this is a post-emergent. 8, 9, and 10 showed some damage. Mesotrione, we applied pre-emergence. This is what the damage we saw to hemp. The hemp would germinate and start taking up that pre-emergent herbicide, and it inhibits pigment production. And so you saw some bleaching out of the hemp, and those plots had very little survival rate of hemp plants in them. But if you look, we have some others that we had pretty good results as far as low phytotoxicity of the hemp to some of these herbicides. So I'm going to kind of buzz through these graphs. I'll tell you what's important. Nobody generally likes graphs unless you're a true science person, and but we're a little bit of oddballs anyway. So, but one thing to look at, if you see a bar that's got the same letter on it, that means regardless of how they differ in height, it's not statistically different. You can't say that this product was better than this or vice versa. Okay, and so this first graph is from the Bowling Green location, and we're looking at phytotoxicity, and this is a visual rating, and we're looking at how much of the hemp was damaged by the herbicide. And so we went in and evaluate these periodically, but this data I think is about 3 weeks post application of the herbicide. Right? The blue bars are all the herbicides that are pre-emergent. So we planted the hemp, sprayed the herbicide before it came up. Right? The red bars represents those are post-emergent, and those were applied when hemp was about 12 inches tall. So on this particular case, the lower the number, that means the less damage those herbicides did to the industrial hemp. So pre-emergence worked pretty well, except for that mesotrione, which I mentioned earlier in Bowling Green. And the post-emergence, MSMA and bromoxynil did pretty well, where the others, we saw quite a decent amount of phytotoxicity. Right? This is the same data from the Lexington location. And if you notice, in the Lexington location, we saw more damage with the pre-emergent herbicides compared to Bowling Green, and a little bit less damage on the post-emergence. However, mesotrione still hammered the hemp pretty bad, and so did trifloxysulfuron. So industrial hemp doesn't care for those two herbicide chemistries. Right? We looked at fresh weights of hemp, kind of correlate that maybe with fiber production. And in Bowling Green, again, the pre-emergence worked pretty well, and the two post-emergence, MSMA and bromoxynil, worked pretty well. Didn't affect the total fresh biomass weights. Okay. I might also point out that between the weed-free check and the untreated control, you see they have the same letters. So we didn't see any difference there. You would expect that where you had weeds, you would have less hemp. In this particular case, in our Bowling Green location, the hemp grew so well, and we had it a little bit higher population. There wasn't much of a weed pressure there. Okay. All right. In Lexington, remember that the Lexington type is a seeded type, so you're going to have shorter plants. So that's why all the bars are lower, a lower biomass. But even though we had some damage from some of these pre-emergents in Lexington, the pyroxasulfone and metallochlor rebounded a little bit, and so we didn't necessarily see that a whole lot of effect on biomass. All right, but again, the post-emergence did a little bit better in Lexington than in Bowling Green. All right, I'm not going to, in effort for time, I'm not going to talk necessarily about amount of weeds that we had. One, because in Bowling Green we didn't have a whole lot of weed pressure, but it's hard to get uniform weeds to pop up over a research plot. So there's a lot of variability in that data. I want to move on to seed weights, though, however, and look at the Bowling Green data first. And looking at the weed-free check and untreated control, we actually saw an improvement in seed production when we used the pre-emergent metallochlor. Didn't necessarily see that in Lexington, but I think what we observed, and Dr. Willen, you correct me if I'm wrong, but we think the metallochlor thinned out our plots just enough that we had fewer plants, but we had larger plants that produced more seed there in Bowling Green, and we were at a higher planting density there. Okay, pendimethalin and fomesafen did not significantly reduce. They were the same as far as seed yields, and on the post-emergent MSMA and bromoxynil and even rimsulfuron, we cannot say was statistically different. In terms of seed production, again though, you see our two culprits that really hurt the hemp: trifloxysulfuron and mesotrione. Right. In the Lexington location, again, the mesotrione and trifloxysulfuron lowered seed production. Okay. Pyroxasulfone and metallochlor wasn't statistically different from the controls. Okay. Bromoxynil and MSMA still look pretty good on the post-emergent side. So even though initially we saw a lot of phytotoxicity and some of these pre-emergence, the hemp had some time to grow out of that damage and produce pretty close to or near the same statistically as where we did not apply any herbicides. Okay, so you saw lots of graphs with pretty colors. What does it mean? All right, so let's summarize. We had several pre-emergents that did pretty well in the Bowling Green study. And, but however, we did not see, they did not perform as well in the Lexington. But if you remember, we had two different planters. And in the Lexington site, average planting depth was about 1/4 of an inch. In Bowling Green, we went to 1/2 an inch. And so we're in the process of doing a greenhouse study now, looking at planting depth with some of these different pre-emergents. And the idea is that you want to get that hemp seed below where the pre-emergents are going to be applied in the soil so that root radical doesn't take up that herbicide when it germinates. All right, so we think that might be an issue. The other possible difference in those is that we did have two different types of cultivars. And it might just be simply a cultivar issue between the two locations. So we'll be looking at that. On the post-emergent side, you know, the differences between two locations might be cultivar difference, or it might just be the stage of growth. And so we need to do a little bit more research on post-emergence. When's the best time to apply these? At what stage of growth and development for the hemp? As far as controlling weeds, but also which would be the least injurious to that crop. All right, we'll say that of the post-emergence, Bromoxynil and MSMA seem to do the best. I don't look towards ever seeing MSMA labeled because it's on the EPA list to try to be phased out. Bromoxynil didn't affect the hemp very much. It'll kill a few weeds, but it's not great on controlling a lot of different weeds. I will also say that we have some, it wasn't in this trial, but we've had some experience applying but fluazaflop, which is trade names Fusilade you might be familiar with. And we've had good luck at controlling grasses in industrial hemp with that product, but not broadleaves. So broadleaves are going to be a problem, especially post-emergent control. So I think a lot of these pre-emergents might be a way to go in the future on trying to control some weeds. Let me say this. If you apply a herbicide to your hemp crop, you are doing so illegally. Okay? There is no herbicides that are labeled for industrial hemp. All right? And nobody applied herbicides to their crop this year, right? Where's Miss Doris at? Yeah, right? Nobody applied it. Okay. So we're able to do that because Research Institute, and we're not selling the product, we're destroying it and so forth. So first of all, the crop has to become legal, and then you will start to see maybe some more companies look into investing in the research and the funds to get some of their products labeled for industrial hemp weed control. I would like to take time to thank my fellow investigator, Dr. Todd Willen at Western Kentucky University and Department of Agriculture for their help with this study. I also want to thank Dave Williams and Rich Mundell at University of Kentucky for letting us come out and plant some plots at their research facility. And then to the Kentucky Department of Agriculture for allowing us to participate in all their support and experience, especially Doris, because that's who I email all the time. So we thank you for that. I will say that, save this date, July the 12th, which is a Tuesday, we will be having a Western Kentucky University Hemp Conference and Field Tour. And so you'll have, Dr. Williams has been kind to accept the invitation to speak. Lee, not Lee, I always want to say Eric. I don't know why I want to say Lee Walker, but I always want to say Lee. It's Eric Walker at the University of Tennessee. We'll also be speaking as well as Dr. Willen and myself. So you'll have opportunity to see more research, but we also will have field plot tour so you can see the current research that's going on. And then we'll have a roundtable discussion right now. Commissioner Quarles has agreed to be a part of that roundtable discussion, as well as Warren Beeler, who is the Governor Bevan's Ag Policy Director, and maybe some other state representatives to field questions from you guys. So save that date. When we get everything finalized, we'll get that information out. But what questions do you have related to weed control or herbicide or anything else in general before I turn it over to Dr. Williams? Yes.
It looks to me like you plowed and disc
Mm-hmm.
and all that. No one tried no-till?
No one tried. We didn't have no-till, but that's on slate for our research this summer. So hopefully, if you come on July 12th, you'll get to see some no-till plots. Yeah. But we've been talked to some people that's produced, and I think somebody in this room maybe, but have done this. But I think there's been some no-till, and Doris might know. Some farmers have done some no-till, and I think it's been somewhat successful. So we'll see. Okay. But I know some people's done it. All right. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.